Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. You can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right. Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willies, your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We are going to have a great show for you today. Actually, I have two guests on the show today. And you know what? These guys are great. Because you know what? This is intergenerational activism, which is what it's going to take for us to move forward, my brothers and my sisters. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Title of the show today, Greg Palast talks protest and voter suppression. Sarah Syed, first person view of a protest. May Wood, welcome aboard. AVQ, welcome aboard. Michael Rudnin, welcome aboard. Thank you guys for being here. Please do, folks that are just joining us, please do remember to share our programs. This is how we are going to make a difference. This is how we make sure people hear the things we want them to hear, and not solely what those in charge, the plutocracy, the oligarchy, the wealthy, the people that needs to keep us sort of down to get things done. So please share. Without sharing, without creating our own media, without making sure that we are doing what we must do, it does not happen. Anyhow, folks, we're going to have a great show for you today. Subtitle of the show, if I can get to it, is Greg Palast recounts his LA protest experience, presents an eyewitness to George Floyd murder in Minneapolis, and talks voter suppression. I wrote voter impression. That's funny. Voter suppression. Sarah Syed, an activist, a community activist, first person account of a protest. And I mean, the reason I wanted to have that is you have to hear, well, we'll talk about that later. Having both Greg Palast and Sarah Syed on the same show illustrates a multi-generational progressive movement. Greg Palast almost had a confrontation with an LA police until he realized he was a reporter. Look, I got a bunch of typos in this blog. I just got through with it, didn't get a chance to review it. So if you're reading the blog, forgive the typos. I'll be cleaning it up as I play the other story. But forgive me for those. Didn't have a lot of time. He also provided us with an eyewitness to the murder of George Floyd. Palast then continues into his passion, voter suppression, a subject he wrote about, including in his recent book. Sarah Syed gives a first-person account of her attendance at and assistance to the Houston George Floyd protest. She was out there giving out masks and doing all kinds of things to help the movement. I mean, I think it's important that we highlight all these folks that all on their own, they're doing important things to keep our movement going, to make sure that those people who are putting their bodies, their souls, their lives on hold to go ahead and make a difference for us all, get recognized. So anyhow, we're going to start with the show. But before I get there, I want to give you guys a little bit of info right here, because the polling is starting to change. You know, we can never really know what happens a few months down, but if the trajectory is any example, I think this little piece that I'm going to play here will make quite a bit of us happy. Check this out.
But Charlie, what do you see in all of the polling that we're seeing? What's it telling us about the presidential race as of tonight?
Well, first, I've covered politics for 36 years, and I've never seen this happen before. But anyway, the thing is, if you take the live interview, real people calling real people, the average is about 10. NBC Wall Street Journal and ABC Post had it at 7. CNN had it 14, Quinnipiac and Marist had it 11. I mean, but basically 10 is the average of the like real polls. And whenever it's at 10, you're going to have 3 or 4 points one way or the other. So, but he has clearly slipped several points, 3 or 4 points in the last few weeks. And the thing is that CNN poll was actually taken after all the other polls were. So it could be absolutely dead on. But look at the state polling. Just look at the Real Clear Politics averages. He's behind in 5 of the 6 key states: Arizona, Florida, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and tied in North Carolina. Clearly, there has been slippage. Now, how much slippage you could argue about.
And Charlie, what do you see between now and in the next 140 days or so? What changes this?
Well, the thing is, President Trump's numbers are not very resilient, and I don't think he's ever going to drop much below this because this is his base, and it's bedrock. They're not moving anywhere. But I think what's happened the last few weeks is his ability to go after these swing voters in the middle has been compromised by sort of erratic behavior. The economy was balancing out doubts about him as a person and as a leader. But you take the strong economy out, and suddenly then those character issues, the leadership issues start going up, start becoming a real problem.
Yes, they start to become a very, very real problem. And it seems like that is where we are getting. A lot of times we've been wondering, when are those polls going to finally reflect the type of president that we have? When are these polls going to be telling us the truth about what people believe? Because let me tell you what I really find hard to believe, right? I find it very hard to believe that as many people believe what's going on is really good for their own, whether they are sycophants or not, whether they really believe that this guy is in their best interest. I kind of very much doubt it. But hey, who am I? Okay, I think that the CNN, that was a CNN poll you put in there. Thank you for putting that there, Senor Rudnin. Hey, Norman Reynolds, welcome aboard, my brother. Welcome aboard. Okay, let's go ahead and listen to Greg Palast, and then after that, we'll be back with Syed. So let's go ahead and take on Greg, and then we'll take it from there, brothers and sisters. Welcome to another edition of Politics Done Right. I'm here with, once again, Greg Palast. Greg, how are you doing today?
Pretty good in the lockdown. I'm in Los Angeles, so I'm in under
official
law here.
Basically. Well, I have a question for you first of all, Greg.
Mm-hmm.
I want to show the audience the video that you last put out. Check this out, guys.
Leave the area or I'm gonna hit you with a 40 mil.
Press. Why are you here?
No justice, no peace, no righteous police. That's why.
Okay. This is Greg Palast in Los Angeles reporting where there have been police cars on fire. We're right in front of the police station in downtown Los Angeles. There's a curfew which is taking effect in 1 minute, and there have been 500 arrests so far.
Okay, Greg, what nerve you had to go out there downtown and what kind of nerve was it that made you believe you could be downtown? What are you that allowed you to do that?
Partly it was maybe my journalist stupidity, not intelligence, looking for trouble, even though it wasn't looking for me. And I have to say that this is not a small thing. I have my goddaughter living with me, and she is African Swiss. And, and suddenly she said, I have black skin. Do I have to worry? And suddenly I have this young woman living in my household and I have to worry about her well-being. So I said, okay, let's go out and see what's going on. So she actually insisted I do the story. So it was her decision to be courageous. But then she was, I must admit, she was reasonably scared. And so what happened was we have martial law basically. Well, right now we have a guard in the streets right near me, M16s, the whole thing, but I'm less worried about the National Guard despite their weapons than the LA police, who have a very, very long history of being of ultra violence, and especially aimed at people of color. So yeah, I was concerned. In fact, I have a book coming out, as you know, called How Trump Stole 2020. And in the middle of that book, and this is important too to understand why I went out there, in the middle of that book is a 48-page comic book. I say, well, what are you doing with this 48-page comic book? One, to make my book entertaining, because the last one where I had a comic book hit the New York Times bestseller list, so we intend to do it again. But most important is that the comic book is written by a guy named Ted Rall. He was the LA Times cartoonist and columnist who would lampoon the LAPD's brutality against young Black and Hispanic residents of Los Angeles. And because of his going after the cops in the LA Times, the police demanded that the LA Times fire him. We have the internal records, by the way, that we investigated this. The internal records show that the chief of police himself demanded the firing of this journalist. So I then hired him to produce the comic book for How Trump Stole 2020. You have to understand the LAPD, despite the image that Los Angeles is laid back and progressive and cool and multiracial, not the LAPD. They are basically a leftover slave patrol, and they're brutal. And if a journalist says a damn word about the LAPD, they come after you. And they come after. So it was almost like I can't resist that challenge.
Now, it seemed from the video that I saw, it seemed like you almost got shot.
Yes. Well,
explain.
So what happened was I was near the LA police headquarters. It was a few minutes after the 8 p.m. curfew, so anyone on the street is violating the law. There were mass demonstrations, but with so many police all over, the demonstrators trying to get towards the police department of protest couldn't get there. Only about 6 kids were there. It was about 8:39. Anyway, so there were about 6 Black Lives Matters protesters. I know, because you'll see in the little film that you've shown that these, they saying, why? I said, why are you here? Black Lives, because Black Lives Matter. It's like, and so you could see these are hardly threatening kids. They were just kind of standing around, kind of lost, wondering what to do now. And these cops, I mean, you're talking hundreds of cops, but in the front phalanx of about a dozen, in the very front middle, their obvious leader pulls up and says, I'm 40 millimeter up. That's a bullet. That's saying he's loading a bullet. And then he says, I'm going to put a 40 in you, talking to me and the demonstrators, the protesters. They're only about, 15, 18 feet away. He's going to put a bullet in us. He's going to shoot. So he said a 40, I'm going to put a 40 in you. Now, there's 3 choices for a 40. I happen to know these weird things. Number 1 is a 40 millimeter tear gas canister. Well, another reporter, Ruben Salazar, was killed by the LA police when they fired a tear gas canister into his head at close range.
I remember that.
So Ruben Salazar was murdered basically by the LA police with a tear gas canister. So I don't find those benign. The second is that the LA police are issued 40 caliber ammunition, semi-hollow. This is called an FBI load, and it'll rip you to pieces. And the third thing is that the LA Times admitted to the Wall Street Journal that they were using 40 millimeter bullets that are rubber encased. So they are, quote, less lethal. I don't know what less lethal is. If there's something like less dead, lethal means that kills you. So is there a less dead way to die? I don't know. But getting hit by a 40, these things, can go through a Humvee door. So now I'm not just so you understand, I'm not like I'm not playing Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm not an action hero. I'm not a brave guy. but in a tough situation, I do tend to think very fast. And when he was threatening to fire at these kids, whether it's a tear gas shell, a 40 millimeter bullet, a 40, you know, I don't care, a 40 caliber bullet, whatever it was going to be nasty. And so instead of running away, which would just give them my backside as a target, I decided to kind of not run, but go right at the cops, right to them, right into the guns, with holding up my press pass, screaming, "Press, press, press." Now, you know, luckily, some people say, well, if I say press, 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 that makes me an extra target for these Trumpites, right, in blue. But this guy, I think, was worried because we were also filming. So he said, "Oh, okay, I didn't see that." As if I didn't have a press badge, it was okay to shoot me.
Actually, that's probably what it meant. And maybe if you also were a black CNN broadcaster, you would have been arrested as well.
Well, that's the issue. And I've had this. I work, you know, I have an assistant producer, the hip hop artist, Jevin Lamar. And, you know, we've had these discussions about being careful with the LAPD. And, well, obviously all over America. And then we have a second film. I don't know if you have a chance to show that.
Greg, one of your correspondents in Minneapolis, I think, interviewed one of the eyewitnesses to George Floyd's death. Is that correct?
That's correct. In fact, we have a clip of that. And I don't know, if it doesn't break your heart, you don't have a heart.
Well, guys, take a look at this. This is sad.
I see the officer at the door, police called Mr. Floyd, and they were talking. After that, I watched the police officer handcuff Mr. Floyd and take him over to the squad car. And as Mr. Floyd was on the ground, I kept telling the officer, "Bruh, get your foot off his neck because he's stopped breathing. He's gonna die." And the officer refused to get his foot off of Mr. Floyd's neck. And in the meantime, that's what happened, why Mr. Floyd died. If the officer just had to listen to me for that 1 minute, we wouldn't have all these problems going on in our state right now, Minnesota. Yeah. But by the officer taking it on not to take your foot off Mr. Floyd's neck, this is consequence everybody got to pay, including me. Watch a man die. And watching me right now waking up, the first thing I hear is Mr. Floyd is saying, "Mom, they killed him in the street." And I lost my mom 2 years ago. It's devastated and it hurts.
So what you just saw is, I mean, there's not much to add. The cop, forget all the stories, you know, the cop didn't know what was happening or whatever. 8 minutes, and there was this man standing next to him. There's a crowd screaming, taking pictures, and there's a man standing next to him, this witness that we saw, saying, "He can't breathe, he's going to die." And he said, "I watched this man die." You know, this is, but you know, again, it's not like it's new business. I grew up in Los Angeles. The LA riots happened after a man named Detweiler, I remember, was shot, gunned down by the police because he was taking his wife to the hospital. She was pregnant and about to give birth. And so he flagged, you know, he was speeding, of course, but he flagged down a cop, and rather than help him out, they just gunned him down.
Wow.
I remember, you know, the Rodney King riots of
that.
Now, you know what? People say, "Oh, I remember when Rodney King happened." And unfortunately, some of my white friends said, "Oh, well, you know, this is an unusual situation." No, it's not. What was unusual was one of the very first times. This is before cell phones, but the guy had one of those little, for the first time, we had little home video
8mm camera, yeah.
And so the guy had a little home camera and videoed the just brutal beating of a handcuffed black man on the ground. And this is an endless story, and it's got to stop. And it goes back to some of the issues that I work on as a journalist. Most of my time as a journalist is spent on uncovering ways that they steal your vote, which is why I wrote How Trump Stole 2020. And it goes together. You have to understand, when you have you have an unelected president, as I prove in the book, Trump was not elected in 2016. Well, he was elected, but by basically massive vote thievery. It's real simple, okay? And he's trying to pull it off again. If you have a president who's not elected, he's not accountable to the electorate. He's accountable to his base, which helps him steal the election. We saw with George Bush, if you remember, and I'm the journalist, and it's in my book too. I'm the journalist who uncovered for The Guardian that Katherine Harris and Jeb Bush back in 2000, for people old enough to remember, they removed tens of thousands of black people from the voter rolls. I uncovered that. They called them felons who weren't allowed at the time to vote in Florida if you have a felony record. And exactly 0 were felons, exactly 0. So what's happened is that led to George Bush being president. Well, once he got elected president by stealing Florida, he could do what he wants. He wasn't responsible to the electorate. So we end up in the war in Iraq. Believe me, if you have elected presidents that feel that they have to go back to the electorate, you don't have massive mayhem in our streets or on this planet.
There are several reasons for the dehumanization of black people, people of color, and black men specifically. And you're absolutely correct that voting plays a part. Look at Florida. How many people are taken off the roll? And now that they passed the law that says a felon who has come back into society, paid his due, should be able to vote again. Isn't that what's going on there, where they're still trying in the court system? They've just lost the battle, I think, in one of the upper courts, but they're still trying to do the same thing.
Okay, let me explain. In Florida, until last year, if you had a felony record, you couldn't vote. That is, if you had a felony record in Florida. And then overwhelmingly, like 2-1, including the majority of Republicans, voted to repeal one of the last of the Jim Crow laws, because the Ku Klux Klan literally wrote that law for the state of Florida and other southern states. Other states have gotten rid of this. In almost any state. By the way, if you're listening and you do have a felony record in state, you can vote if you've served your time, including probation, supervision, etc. That's important to know, because we have 9 million people out there who are entitled to vote but think that they can't. If you have a felony record in almost every state in America, you can vote. Just make sure that you've done your supervision also as well. But in the state of Florida, people voted, say, well, let's join the rest of America and say, once you've served your time, you become your citizen again. But then the Republican state legislature, realizing this is going to bring in 1 million people, by the way, 88% Democrats. Doesn't matter whether you're black or white or red or brown or green. If you go to prison, you come out a Democrat. We'll talk about that. But okay, so they realized, oh my God, we're gonna have 1 million Democrats. So they passed a law saying, well, you have to pay all your fines and court fees. Now understand, Egberto, you had a conviction 20 years ago. In the old days, you were a kid and you had a joint in your pocket. And of course, it's Florida, you're black, you get a felony record. Well, you can't find, the courts, neither you nor the courts can even find what your court fees were or something like that, or these old fees. There's not even records to figure out how to clear it. So finally, an appeals court said, look, this is just a dumb, cheap trick to prevent the public will, which is to let people vote once they've served their time. So they basically, a court said, this is baloney, but they're still dragging their feet. Basically, they're trying to drag their feet past November. And understand, here's one of the things when you get again into race, okay? When I did the investigation in 2000, found that the election was stolen by calling black men felons. Now, you have to understand, not one, it was 0 were ex-cons who couldn't vote in Florida. 0, none, including like Willie Steen, a guy that I met. He was an orderly at a hospital. He'd been a Gulf War veteran. He took his 5-year-old son to show him American voting. Look what we can vote now as black people. Look what Martin Luther King did for us. And he goes in, they say, you can't vote. He's in front of his 5-year-old kid. They say, you're a felon. He says, what? I have a traffic ticket. And the problem is that even the Democratic Party would not defend these voters because they say, well, we can't defend felons. First of all, they're not felons. Even if they were, they're Americans. And their vote should be their vote. But in this case, they were wrongly removed. But if you accuse a young black man of being a felon, he's convicted. In the voter's mind, in the official's mind, the young black man, forget it. They say he has a felony record and he complains. Look out, kid. We're going to throw you back in the slammer.
Right.
problem.
Well, I mean, and that is sad. Well, look, Greg, as usual, it's always my pleasure to speak to you. I'm glad that you went out there and that you ended safely outside of LA. Good job in LA. I think people are going to enjoy that little snippet there. And as far as that interview in Minneapolis, there's not a lot of folks getting to speak to those particular people. So, I mean, thank you for bringing that to us here at Politics Done Right. Before I go, I always ask everybody the same question, and that is there something you would like me to ask you that I didn't ask you?
Yes. Why should we support Egberto Willies and his program? I am joining your Patreon, and I hope that everyone listening does the same, because only this man has the courage to bring me through the electronic Berlin Wall here. I mean, as he mentioned, I work for The Guardian. That's a British paper. Why is this American boy writing for British papers and working for British television? And the answer is because I'm locked out in my own country. They don't want to hear this news about endemic racism, the continuation of slavery in another form, which is to take away your votes and your rights, and as we now know, your life too. So I hope people will. So there you go. That's not a question. I gave a speech. If you don't
love that.
support
Thank you so kindly, Greg. And you have a good one. You keep up doing the good work. You will always have at home at Politics Done Right, because you know what? Our audience love that we just give you the straight info and nothing more. So thank you so kindly, Greg. You have a wonderful day.
You too. See you at gregpalast.com.
That touched my heart. That really touched my heart when he did that. I mean, it was like completely unbeknownst to me, completely. But you know what? I thanked him, because that's a good thing. Anyhow, folks, let me tell you something. Recently the Senate passed an anti-lynching bill. And when we talk about, and I'm getting to Sarah Syed in 1 minute. But when we get to see that we have an anti-lynching bill and supposed Christians, I want to read this to you actually. The title of this little piece is called Evangelical Group Wants Gays Removed from Anti-Lynching Bill. So, okay, granted, evangelicals don't believe in gay marriage. They don't believe in people being homosexuals, etc. In as much as a lot of the people in their churches are in fact homosexuals, or in fact gay, or in fact everything that looks like the general society, they are. But they don't like them. My question to you folks is, how sick is it that because you don't like these people, you don't want to protect them from having a national anti-lynching bill to protect them? Are you saying then that you don't mind if, because this law doesn't protect them, that somebody goes out and lynches them, kills them, or whatever? Is that who you really are? The U.S. Senate last month, from NBC, the U.S. Senate last month unanimously passed a bill that would explicitly make lynching a federal crime. Not everyone, however, is pleased with passage of the Justice for Victims of Lynching Act. Liberty Counsel, an evangelical nonprofit that opposes gay rights, and its chairman, Matt Staver, are taking issue with the bill's inclusion of LGBTQ people. The old saying is, once that camel gets the nose in the tent, you can't stop them from coming the rest of the way in, Staver said in an interview with conservative Christian news outlet Old One News Now. This is a way to slip it under a so-called anti-lynching bill, and to sort of circle the wagon and then go for the jugular at some time in the future. Staver told One News Now that his organization, which has been labeled an anti-LGBTQ hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center, is lobbying lawmakers in the House to have them remove the bill's sexual orientation and gender identity language before taking a vote. Similarly, the group encouraged Congress in November to remove language about sexual orientation and gender identity. discrimination from a trade agreement with Mexico and Canada. Liberty Counsel did not immediately respond to NBC News request for comment. Again, the evil. These are Christians. Now, can you see why a lot of people are running away from these people? These supposed religious people? Of course they are. Why? What's religious about that? Anyhow, the next person I want to bring on is a young woman here in Houston, and it's great to see this multidimensional folks on the same path, the same fight towards progressive values that helps us all, unlike conservative values who, what does conservative mean again? Conserve, keep things the way they are. Well, the way things are is great for a very small percentage of Americans, but again, it's put into a facade that it's cloaked into, oh, this is best for you. We know better. And all we have to do is do our job to show how much better life would be under our progressive policies. But anyhow, let's go ahead and listen to Syed, and then we'll take it on the other side. Anyhow, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So essentially, I am a native Houstonian. I work in different areas, allowing fluidity to kind of help with any progressive platform and really amplifying the voices of Black and Brown communities the most, especially AAPI, because I resonate with them. And I am a mediator, so I work in alternative dispute resolution. And most of the time, I like to be pretty fluid when it comes to like labels, right? I don't consider myself an activist or anything like that. It's really just a community organizer that I identify with, and I help when help is needed, right? And constantly making sure that we're helping in our Black and Brown communities, not just and preventing them any harm, right? And that's really it in a nutshell. I stay pretty low key, and I like to go a little bit. I like to help all communities in the best way, and particularly marginalized communities, because I am a marginalized person in a marginalized community. So that really hits home for me.
So you consider yourself a marginalized person as well?
Yeah, I do.
Is that, well, your last name is Syed. I don't like to make assumptions. Are you,
Yeah.
how do you classify?
Sure. So I am a Muslim minority Shia. And so I am mixed as well. I have a huge family, a very large diaspora. And so, between the first and third generation, we have Indian, Pakistani, Iranian, Mongolian, and African. So I'm a little bit of a mutt, you could call, but I am mixed, and so I identify with a lot of marginalized folks as well, just because I feel like I can resonate with what they're experiencing. You know, one of the biggest things I've learned is I didn't realize I was a marginalized person within a marginalized community until I was in my adult life.
What does that mean?
So essentially, I thought I was really privileged growing up. I lived in a really white part of town, daughter of immigrants, right? Granddaughter of refugees and expats. And I was put in really good schools. And I thought, my parents, they gave up a lot to come to this country and put me in a place of privilege, and not realizing that because I'm a Muslim minority, I have been pushed to a different part of Houston in a niche that, has historically been oppressed. So like they move our communities to different areas, and they don't allow us to assimilate the same way into white neighborhoods. So it's just so interesting. And so I didn't realize what that was or what that looked like until I was an adult. So it's just been interesting, the journey that I've had in my life. And
So where are your parents originally from? You said they're immigrants. See, I'm an immigrant, so I have a lot of, I can feel, I probably feel with your parents. Where are they from originally?
Yeah, so my mother, she was born in northern Pakistan, but she didn't actually live there. She grew up in Uganda, and she was there during Idi Amin's time, interesting enough. and then she came to the US. And then my father, he also was born in Pakistan, but he didn't live there. He lived in Iran before the revolution. So then he came to the US. So both of them have just such interesting stories and journeys that brought them to the US.
Now, interestingly, one of when we started talking about coming on and talking about your experiences at the rally, or should I say the protest for George Floyd, you seem to be a little bit hesitant to talk. Why exactly?
Sure, no, I think that's a valid question. Essentially, while I was there, historically, I have helped with protests in the past. I've helped organize. I've been really under the radar because I think it's important to amplify Black voices at this time. And I try to create intentional spaces for Black voices and hear from our Black siblings. While I was at the protest, I was followed a few times. When I was passing out, distributing mask gloves from my car, moving from Discovery Green to City Hall, I was followed two times there, where people would show up behind me and start taking videos from inside of their cars of my license plate, while I got out of my car to pass out gloves and masks. And so it is a little bit. That's why I am a little bit hesitant, because when you're followed, it can be dangerous. And so I also want to make sure that we are maintaining that safety in that regard as well. So.
Now, do you have a feeling if these people that were following you were undercover police officers, right-wing sympathizers, or do you have any feeling or gut feeling as to what that was?
I'm not sure. I came into the protest specifically to avoid that. So essentially, I didn't use my actual car. I had gotten a rental for that day. Whenever you're carrying items or things that need to be organized for an action, you want to also keep yourself safe and make sure that you're in a space to provide resources to humans. And so sometimes people will have different types of intentions when you are out there in the field. And so, it's important to protect yourself in those situations. I have no idea what kinds of human beings I was being followed by, but I know that I was followed by an unmarked car. At one point, I was followed by a car with Houston plates. And at another point, I was followed by a really large Suburban. So I don't know. I can't really assume based off the car, but I know I was followed. So.
Now, you said you were giving out PPEs. Were there just a whole lot of people there unprotected, as if we're not going through a pandemic, in your opinion?
So that's a great question. So essentially, in terms of my involvement, I was made aware about 48 hours in advance. So we had a few days to get any resources that we were able to, because that's how community organizing works at a grassroots level. And we had gotten things ourselves, right? Any kind of mask, gloves, hand sanitizers. And there are also organizational efforts from, let's say, Black Lives Matter, the Houston chapter. They also raised funds for those items as well. And they also worked with OCA. OCA is a great organization advocating for AAPI communities, and they work in the communities just advancing social, political, and economic well-being of AAPI. And they were there also with boxes and gloves. And I was working with Debbie Chen, who works in OCA, and we together collectively, we were passing and distributing. And in terms of the equipment that we were passing out, it was really whatever we could get our hands on at that point, just because it was done at such a bare bones level. And the fact that Debbie Chen was able to work with OCA and bring all of those things was amazing, and bring volunteers. OCA Greater Houston and the Shabu House donated like 2,000 gloves and masks to support the action. And there was the majority of people were observing social distancing, and the majority of human beings present also try to be as safe as possible. There are some outliers that didn't feel like they needed gloves, and that's okay, but we try to be there and be present and provide that to everyone there. So
Tell me a little bit. You said the OCA donated 2,000 PPEs, and
Mhm.
Debbie Chen is one of the representatives or
Mhm.
of that organization. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so from my understanding, OCA Greater Houston and the Shabu House, there's two orgs that came collectively together to donate mass increments in bulk of gloves and masks and hand sanitizer. And so did a lot of individuals. In fact, as a matter of fact, we had just individuals, just great civilians that would just come up to our table and be like, "I brought water. It's packaged. I brought boxes for you," and just all types of support from every single person that could. And was privileged enough to brought us things as well. So I feel like it was a community effort.
Yeah. Tell us, who exactly is OCA Greater Houston?
Yeah, so it's a nonprofit organization, as I said, and they advance the social, political, and economic well-being of AAPI in the community. They do a lot of work. Let's say
You
they
just
work
use a
on,
term that a lot of our audience would know, AAPI.
yeah, Asian American Pacific Islanders.
Excellent.
They do a lot of advocacy for making sure that we collect data appropriately on the census, making sure that we are representing our Chinese communities appropriately, and they work a lot with providing scholarships, making sure that they are there as a umbrella for all organizations to kind of come together and work together and create meaningful change in communities. They advocate for Asian Pacific Americans, and they hope to increase that voting block as well. And there's so many different human beings a part of that organization, so it's great. I urge everyone to take the opportunity to learn a little bit about them. And what's interesting is I work with the New Leaders Council,
Hmm.
and they're also a progressive organization that is training the next generation of leaders. And a lot of my NLC cohort and alum are a part of OCA. Stephen Wu is vice president of OCA. Debbie Chen is also an NLC alum. So it was nice to work with humans that you know we know, but also haven't seen in a while
Hmm.
because of COVID, and work collectively from just all avenues of um, organizing. So.
Now, tell me a little bit now that we kind of got that packed, tell me
Mhm.
what was your experience at the march in general? Do you think it was, how effective do you think it was?
Great question. So I feel like that action was put on in the best of intentions, right? We needed to bring awareness about George Floyd, him being a Houston native. Um, he historically, if you read a little bit about him, he was a part of the original Screwed Up Clique, and so he does have such ties in the Houston community. He went to Yates High, and so he was a member of our town, our city. So the fact that we could show up for him, first of all, is amazing. That we could be present for this human being that had his life taken away. Number two, I will say that in terms of my experience, it was all hands on deck, right, within a short period of time. And so not everything will go exactly the way that we want or exactly planned, but the fact that we were there to share space, create a platform, be present, and protect our Black and Brown communities from harm is like the biggest thing I know for me. Even if I was out there by myself for 2 hours passing out water to people who came to be a part of the procession, or bringing 6 tables in my car, renting a car to put 6 tables in my car to come and then create stations to pass and distribute gloves, masks, and everything that we could, it is the least that I could do,
Hmm.
right? It is not even in comparison to what so many other human beings experienced and had the ability to do. A lot of our um, Black siblings were able to come together, have meaningful conversation, have individuals speak up about their own experiences, about what we can do better. They were able to, come to Discovery Green, and we had all types of human beings present. Houston's the most diverse city to me, I feel,
Absolutely.
in the U.S. And so it was just so nice to see support from so many human beings. And I think that one of the things I won't forget is a white woman. She was a pastor. She came up to me. She's like, "How do I stay engaged? I've never been to something like this. How am I going to support the Black community?" And so it was so interesting that there was such, heartfelt engagement from so many people. And from Discovery Green to City Hall, it was in an orderly fashion. People had their signs. There was signs in their hands, and they went from Discovery Green to City Hall without any kind of alarming, um, or extremist things happening. We didn't hear or see anything that was too wild or anything until after City Hall, until after the organizers were kind of ending the action, and that's when things kind of spiraled out of control a little bit in terms of um, the level of intensity.
I think there was some damage on some streets where people were breaking windows in some of the streets. Is that right?
After the fact, yeah, I didn't explicitly see that until, and from Discovery Green to City Hall, when I got into my car to take the rest of the things to City Hall and then start passing out things by hand. Like, mind you, after we packed up items at Discovery Green, I then got into my car and passed out things from inside of my car on the same path to City Hall, right? I took my car, followed the rally, followed strangers, and I passed out. And even anybody that was precariously housed or homeless, I passed out masks, gloves, water bottles to anyone on the street on the same pathway to City Hall. And from Discovery to City Hall, I didn't see anything wild. It wasn't until after the fact, when I was leaving, that you started seeing a large gathering of people going to then loot or damage or going into the freeway. So that was after the fact. And
Now,
I was,
to the best of your knowledge, were those weren't the people that organized the event, but infiltrators?
to me, I feel like I didn't explicitly see any organizers leading anyone. What I saw was different types of agitators, different types of human beings, then taking it upon themselves to just go out and do whatever they wanted at that point. And again, there's no control over that. All you can do is keep human beings safe. And so what I did once I saw people, disseminating after City Hall, going back into the streets, kind of just doing their own thing, I started passing out even more waters, like, "Hey, stay hydrated, stay safe," in the best way, and passed out more things at the end of it. And I didn't stay too long after that, because there started being a lot more physical assaults. People started fighting. There were people showing up with rifles, trying to instill fear in communities, in the youth, and to protesters. So I at that point didn't feel as comfortable as I would have wanted.
When you say
And
people started showing up with rifles, are you talking about pretty much right wingers or others?
I can't label anybody. Know is I saw several white men with rifles, and a lot of, they had guns with them, right? And I was like, this is turning into something that I wasn't expecting. I was shocked.
Right.
So
Well, yeah. Well, at least it didn't turn into anything. Let me tell you, Sarah, I appreciate you spending some time with me to give us an account of your experiences at the rallies for George Floyd. And I want to thank you for the hard work that you do there in the progressive movement, in the movement that is trying to make lives better for all of us. So thank you so kindly.
thank you so much for having this conversation, creating this space. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Okay, folks, I hope you enjoyed that. Okay, I think it is about time. I don't have any time to go to the other story I wanted to go, because I got to go talk to you guys and see what you're saying. Let's say, Michael Rudden, I hope the discussion talks about black box voting machines. We actually did a show about that, Michael, before this show with the same guy, with the same Mr. Greg Palast. So you can find that on politicsdoneright.com, where the whole that entire show, if I'm not mistaken, or his entire segment was dedicated to the voter machines, etc., etc. And I have a couple of articles at egbertowillies.com that were written by Greg Palast. So check that out. Check Greg Palast out at egbertowillies.com. ABQ watching on YouTube. Thank you, my brother. Maywood, hello from Long Beach. Maywood replying to Michael Rudden, black box voting machines. Do you mean technology to hack the voting machines? Yep. Norman Reynolds from Houston. We have Michael Rudden saying Biden's up 14 points. Anyone but Trump seems to be prevailing view for the majority of Americans. That is true. Norman says the poll watching caused me to despair of the poll watching causes me to despair of the horse race that captures the current media. Let's deal with the issues, and we will. Mike Cisak, anyone who takes any of these polls serious is ignorant. You always say that when you're losing, Cisak, because you've come on this show before and talked about how great Donald Trump's polls were. How comes you change your tune now that he's losing, my dear brother? Come on now. El Perez McGill. It is surprising that with what is happening at the national level right now, almost half the people polled are for the current president. I mean, people are tribal. They're very tribal, and they're going to have to be hit hard. I mean, right now, the stock market, last I saw, was cratering. So if the stock market continue to crater, he's going to lose the top people because, as it turns out, everybody knows he knows nothing. And the stock market was simply going on the momentum of what Donald Trump of what Obama left behind. And, you know, Donald Trump says, oh, I've created the greatest economy. No, Donald Trump, you've continued an economy, but you changed the inclination to where it slanted down, and now it has crashed. No, sir, you did not create the greatest economy in America. Norman says the poll, let's say now Kathleen is listening on the road. Kathleen, you know how much you honor me by making that statement. I am so honored that my folk are listening as well away. Love you, my friend. Love you, my friend. Let's see. Mike Cisak, Biden still can't get above 80% in the primaries. That means a large number still won't want him as a candidate. That doesn't mean that at all. Donald Trump had the worst rating in the Republican Party ever for a nominee. He did fine on election day, and that is likely to happen. People are tribal. I wish they were not tribal, and that is some of the things that I work on. Hopefully, I'm doing somewhat of a good job of that, trying to get people. That's why I love having Mike Cisak and even Daniel Ledo and others in the room. And they can say whatever they want, and they never have to worry about me saying, you're banned. No, you're not. You can't say that. Because I really do believe everybody has something to offer. A lot of people give me hell for taking that stance, but I do believe that deep in the heart. Okay, Rodnan says, here's Ted Rawls' last cartoon about the... Okay, I'll leave that for people to click on. Mike Cisak says Trump is getting as many votes in the primaries on the GOP side as Biden is getting, which is about 4 times as many previous incumbent presidents. I don't know if that's true, but you know, I'll for now I'll take it under advisement. Maywood, it's true, Mike, that Biden is a choice of the neoliberals rather than the people, but he's still better than Trump. Anybody's better than Trump. Everybody is better than Trump. What we are going to do is when Biden gets in there, we are going to pull Biden. We are going to force Biden to the left, not because of Biden, but because of the coattails that we are going to put in there, the progressive coattails. We are going to make these be the same way the Tea Party forced the Republicans to carry the water for them. Progressives are going to force the Democrats to carry the water, because the water that we are asking them to carry is best for all Americans, not some Americans. The problem is communication has made people... The fact that Mike Cisak, a farmer, is voting Republican after they're decimating his financial, his personal economy. Here we have a good man, a farmer, somebody that we need in my room right now, Mike Cisak. And he loves Donald Trump and he loves what he's doing. Donald Trump is killing him, but he has not yet seen that. You know, we have to have compassion and slowly get to the, he'll see it in the long run, but maybe not right now. Okay, I'm having to kind of slide down real quickly. I'm going to miss a whole lot. Way to go, Greg Palast from Rose Williams. Let's see, Michael Rudnin, we're going to see another outbreak after Trump's next rally. A lot of people are saying that about the outbreak after all these protests in the streets. What they don't realize is the protests in the streets, the things were pretty hot. The virus doesn't seem to do well in hot weather, and a lot of the protesters had on their masks, unlike the picture that Pence took with his people yesterday, which had very little masks on. So I think the outbreak is likely to be more pronounced on the other side. Okay, Michael Rudnin says, Uganda has had a rather violent history as it comes to human rights. Especially, I saw that story a few months ago. I think actually it's a few years ago, where people were having problems. Sean Christian says, let's see, what did Sean Christian says? The greatest gum show in the galaxy, Greg Palast. You remember, I'm kind of from Panama, so I don't always have all these things down. Can't explain what that means to me, Sean Christian. I don't know if that's a positive or a negative, so you got to help me out there, brother. You got to help me out. Okay, Bruce Pollard says, I'm here at last. And Bruce, where were you, brother? Where were you? Thank you for being here, my brother. Thank you for being here. May Wood was replying to CSAC. Mike CSAC was replying to May Wood. Tim Warner says, do we know, welcome aboard Tim Warner, do we know for real who is primarily interested to see this bad behavior, Antifa or far right? Far right, but Antifa also is, I'll go into Antifa another time, but we all know who Antifa is. Then Biden himself admitted to blackmailing the president of Ukraine to fire his top prosecutor. No, he did not. No, he did not. True that, but the speaker said there were no problems till the demonstration was ending. Okay, Berto, I missed one. Politics Done Right interview with Greg Palast about, let's see what you're saying there, about that one. What's up with that, Rudnin? Come on now. No, I'm playing with you. You know, Rudnin is one of our great research. He can find about anything at any time. And Michael Rudnin says, coronavirus is unaffected by hot weather. Saudi Arabia has seen outbreaks. Okay, maybe I'm uninformed. I actually saw some temperature ranges that says unless you have, what it means, Rudnin, are two things. In the open, in the light, you have one, it dissipates more. Two, ultraviolet radiation. And three, supposedly it does not last long in hot temperature on surfaces and in the air. I don't know. I mean, the truth of the matter is there's a whole lot of stuff we don't know about the virus. Anyway, I got to get out of here. So before I go real quick, folks, please remember to support our show by becoming a subscriber to the show. How can you become a subscriber to the show? It's very, very easy. Go to patreon.com/politics done right. For you guys that are listening on podcast, it is patreon.com/politics done right. For those of you who are listening on YouTube, you can always give us a super chat. Hit that $sign, give us a super chat, support the show, let us know that you like what we're doing. For those of you who are listening elsewhere, I just put it in a multi-feed. Patreon.com/politics done right. patreon.com/politics done right. If you prefer to do that on provide support via PayPal, we also have a PayPal address. That is paypal.me/politics done right. PayPal/politics done right. And of course, please shop at our store. Our store is at store.politicsdoneright.com, store.politicsdoneright.com. But most and foremost, I really would love for those of you to subscribe to patreon.com/politics done right. patreon.com/politics done right. And let me put the little thing on the screen there so you can see our store. What do you get? We have, as I see it, Class Warfare, the Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom, which is my book that talks about politics, economy, and all of that. You read that book, you can have a conversation anywhere about these issues the real way. And of course, for my weight problem, I wrote this one called Lose Weight and Be Fit Now. Anybody who has weight problems, in fact, I'm having to use it right now because over the pandemic, I've gained like 10 pounds or so. So I'm trying to extricate that from my body, just like I said. And I said, always give yourself a chance. Forgive yourself and move on. Catch you the next time as well, Rudden. But anyhow, folks, we are at the end of the show. My name is Egberto Willies, and you know how I end this. Baby, I am what? Out! Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember,